locked it. I walked in and called his name, and the house was quiet. His leather chair was empty. The Chet Baker record was on the turntable, but the needle was up. I found him in the kitchen, on the floor, next to the stove. His hand was still reaching for the counter like he'd tried to catch himself. I dropped to my knees and grabbed his shoulder and shook him and said his name over and over, and he was cold, and I knew he was gone, but I kept shaking him because stopping meant it was real. I sat on the kitchen floor and held his hand and cried until I couldn't breathe. I drove home and walked through the door with my face swollen and my shirt wet from tears. My dad was at the kitchen table on his laptop. I sat down across from him and put my hand on his arm. "Dad, I'm so sorry. Grandpa passed." He looked at my hand on his arm, then back at his screen. He was on the kitchen floor when I got there. I think it was quick. He looked peaceful. I squeezed his arm. "Are you okay?" My dad closed the laptop and sighed like I'd told him the car needed an oil change. "Did you lock the house when you left?" "Did I lock the dad?" "He's on the floor. I'm asking because there are valuables in that house and the door needs to be secured." He picked up his phone and walked to the other room, and I heard him say, "Diane, it's me. Dad finally passed. I need you to get over to the house before anyone else does. Bring boxes." He said, "Finally," like he'd been waiting for this phone call his entire life. I sat at the kitchen table with my dead grandfather's hand still cold on my skin and listened to my father coordinate a robbery, and I walked to my room and closed the door and pressed my back against it and slid to the floor. I drove to St. Jude's that afternoon because there was a 7-year-old girl on the 4th floor who deserved to hear it from someone who was actually sad. Ada was 7 and bald from chemo, and she was sitting cross-legged on her hospital bed taping a new drawing to the wall when I walked in. Same drawing she always made, a room with a big window and sunlight pouring through it. Her room had no window, just a curtain and a fluorescent light, and every drawing she taped to that wall was a room with a window she'd never had. She grinned when she saw me. "Is he coming today?" I braced myself on the doorframe. "Ada, he died." Her grin collapsed into something I never want to see on a child's face again, and the drawing slipped out of her hands and floated to the blanket. She pulled her knees to her chest and pressed her face into them and shook, and I sat on the edge of her bed and wrapped my arm around her shoulders and held her while she fell apart. "He promised me a window," she said into her knees. "I know he did. Is it still going to happen?" "Yeah, Ada. I'm going to make sure it does. You promise?" "I promise." She held up her pinky, and I hooked mine around it. Her hand was steady, and mine was shaking. "He gave me his coat once," she said, wiping her face. "I was cold, and he took his coat off and wrapped it around me and said he didn't need it." I pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes because I was about to lose it in front of a 7-year-old, and she had enough to deal with. A nurse caught me in the hallway. "Are you his grandson? The one who came on Sundays?" "Yeah. You're the first family member I've seen in months. His daughter came once and spent the whole visit photographing the furniture." She paused. "He talked about you constantly. Said you were the only honest person in your family." She looked back toward Ada's room. "He was saving for the pediatric wing. 30 years. He told me last month he was running out of time." I gripped the strap of my backpack so hard my hand ached. "Those kids loved him," she said. "More than some of them love their own parents." She hesitated. "Can I tell you something? He stopped eating properly months ago. He was losing weight. We tried to get him to talk to someone about it. That's not right. He always had food when I came over." She looked at me with pity I didn't understand yet. "He stocked the fridge before your visits and emptied it after. He turned the heat up on Sundays and back down when you left. He didn't want you to worry." I looked at the nurse. "You said he saved for 30 years, for the wing, but his house is freezing and his fridge is empty. Where did the money go?" She shook her head. "I don't know. He told me last month he wasn't sure there'd be enough anymore." I walked out to my car and slammed the door and pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. I screamed into the steering wheel until my throat burned because I should have looked. The funeral was 3 days later, and something was wrong before the first hymn finished. My Aunt Diane whispered to a man I didn't recognize during the processional, and the word appraisal floated back to me over the music. At the reception, I passed my uncle in the hallway and heard him say, "The house alone is worth $500,000, into his phone. My dad was in the corner shaking hands like he was hosting a networking event, and when I walked past the coat room, I saw Diane showing someone photos of my grandfather's furniture on her phone and saying, "I've already called a dealer." I looked around the room at every person talking about money at a funeral, and my hands curled into fists down by my sides. My cousin Garrett was in the second row scrolling his phone during the eulogy, and something snapped in me. I walked down my row and across the aisle and ripped the phone out of his hand. "What the hell are you doing?" He grabbed for it. I held it above my head. "He's in a box, Garrett. Your grandfather is in a box 6 feet in front of you, and you're checking Instagram." Garrett lunged for the phone, and I stepped back, and my aunt grabbed my arm and hissed, "Sit down." And my dad appeared beside me with a smile pasted on his face and his fingers digging into my elbow. He steered me back to my row. "Not here." "Then where? When do we get to be be honest about how little any of you cared. He squeezed harder. Not here. At the reception, I turned a corner and caught him on his phone saying, "Have you looked into the accounts yet?" I stepped in front of him. "Who was that?" He pocketed the phone so fast he fumbled it. "Work. It's Grandpa's funeral. I know what day it is. Do you? Because you're already counting his money and he's not even in the ground." His jaw tightened and he walked past me, and I stood there in the hallway with my fists clenched at my sides and my jaw aching because I was surrounded by family and completely alone. The will reading was 3 days after that, and every seat was filled. People I hadn't seen at the house in years were sitting in pressed suits with expectant faces. Diane had a notepad. The lawyer read the document, and my name came out 3 times, and nobody else's. Every face turned toward me like a school of fish, and the hunger in their eyes made my skin crawl. Then the lawyer read the final clause, and my hands gripped the armrest so hard the leather creased. "It is my express wish that the entirety of this estate be used to fund the construction of the pediatric wing at St. Jude's Children's Hospital, to be overseen by my grandson." I bit down on the inside of my cheek because if I made a sound, I was going to fall apart in a room full of people who didn't deserve to see it. Aunt Diane's mouth fell open. Garrett shoved off the wall. My dad's hand landed on my shoulder, hard, holding me in place. In the parking lot, Diane got in my face first. He wasn't in his right mind. I knocked her hand off my arm. He beat me at chess every Sunday. My dad tried the reasonable voice. "We'll sort this out as a family. This is sorted." He sorted it. "It goes to the hospital." Garrett stepped up. "That money belongs to all of us, not some hospital." I turned to him. "You want to look a 7-year-old girl with cancer in the face and tell her she can't have a window because you need the money? You want to do that, Garrett? Because I'll drive you there." He didn't answer. I walked to my car, and my hands fumbled the keys, and I dropped them twice before I could start the engine. I drove to my grandfather's house. The key was under the rock. The door stuck, and when I stepped inside, the house was freezing. I could see my breath in the hallway. I checked the thermostat all the way down. I opened the fridge and found milk, bread, and a jar of peanut butter, and I slammed the door so hard the bottles rattled because this was what his fridge actually looked like when I wasn't coming over. I walked back to the thermostat and turned it all the way up and stood there listening to the furnace kick on for the first time in God knows how long. And the anger hit me so hard my vision blurred because he'd starved in this house and frozen in this house and performed for me every Sunday so I wouldn't see what his own son was doing to him. The Chet Baker record was still on the turntable from my last visit. I put the needle down and the trumpet filled the cold room, and I stood there with Chet Baker playing for no one in a house that should have been warm, and I made a promise to the empty kitchen that whoever did this was going to answer for it. Not to a lawyer, not to a judge, but to me. I went to the study and sat in his leather chair, the one with the cracked armrest, and something crinkled under the cushion. A note in his handwriting. "Check the floorboard in my study. Don't let them find it first." My heart slammed. He knew they'd come for it, and he'd hidden something for me. I pried up the floorboard with a butter knife and found a wooden box with scratches around the lock. I opened it and it was empty. Someone got here first. I hurled the box across the room and it hit the wall and cracked in half. My dad showed up at the kitchen table with his reasonable voice and his folded hands. "Your grandfather was confused. He wouldn't have wanted his life savings going to a building. That's vanity, not charity." I hit the table so hard the salt shaker jumped. "He saved for 30 years to build sick kids a hospital wing, and you're calling that vanity?" Mom tried the soft approach. "You don't want to tear this family apart over a hospital wing, do you? Ada is 7, Mom. She's never seen the sky from her hospital bed. Grandpa promised her a window. You want me to go back there and tell her the window's not coming because my family wants the money?" They stared at me. I shoved my chair back and grabbed my keys. "Ada is waiting for that window, and I'm not letting you take it from her." I walked out. I drove to the house and found a moving truck in the driveway. Aunt Diane was directing movers to carry the dining table out the front door. I blocked the truck with my car, got out, and walked straight to the back of the moving truck. The leather chair was inside, already loaded. I climbed into the truck and dragged it back out myself, scraping it down the ramp, and carried it back into the study. "Get your truck out of his driveway. We're just clearing. You're stealing from a dead man while his body is still warm." I caught the dining table's edge and dragged it back through the front door so hard the legs gouged the hardwood. She called the movers off and left, but the study had been ransacked. intact, drawers open, floorboard pried up. She'd found the same empty box I had. Garrett caught me in the school parking lot after practice. "You think you're special because you showed up on Sundays?" He shoved me backward into my car, hard enough to set off the alarm. I shoved him back harder. "Don't touch me!" He swung and I ducked and his fist dented my car door and he screamed and grabbed his hand. "Yeah, I think I'm special, Garrett. I think I'm the only person in this family who treated Grandpa like a person instead of an ATM. And you broke your hand on my car, so you're going to remember this conversation every time you make a fist." He cradled his hand and backed away, and I picked up my keys off the asphalt where I dropped them and got in my car and drove home with my hands still shaking on the wheel. The family's lawyer filed to contest the will on grounds of diminished capacity, and they'd found a doctor willing to testify. The hearing was in 9 days. I punched the dashboard so hard my knuckles split because they were going to call my grandfather crazy so they could take money from dying kids, and the clock was running. My grandfather's housekeeper, Gloria, had been with him for 20 years. She answered on the first ring and invited me over before I even finished asking. She poured tea and her hands shook the whole time. "Your father came every Tuesday. He brought papers for your grandfather to sign." "What kind of papers?" "Financial documents, transfers." I set the teacup down because my hands had gone numb and the cup was going to end up on the floor. His eyes were bad. He couldn't read the fine print. "Your father told him they were tax documents." I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor. "How much?" "I don't know the amounts. I just know every Tuesday your grandfather had less and your father drove away with more." I paced her kitchen because if I sat still, I was going to put my fist through her wall. Did he know? Did Grandpa know what was happening to him? Gloria looked at the floor. At the end, I think he suspected. He started hiding things. I stopped pacing. "What things?" "Papers. A letter. He told me he put it somewhere safe." She paused. "The Bible on the second shelf. He hollowed it out." The lawyer gave me access to the bank records, and I spread 5 years of statements across the study floor. I went through every page on my hands and knees with a red marker, circling every transfer to my father's account. Hundreds of thousands. I found one from the month Grandpa asked me to drive him to buy a winter coat. He checked every price tag twice and put back the one he wanted because it was too expensive. He was cold because his son was stealing.
Wait, I think there's another egg inside me! A dragon mother only ever produces one egg in her lifetime.
From him. I threw the statement across the room and it fluttered to the ground. I found another from the week he told me the wing might have to wait a little longer. 30 years of saving for Ada's window, and my dad was draining it. I sat on the floor surrounded by paper and my face was wet and I didn't bother wiping it. On the desk beside me was a drawing Ada had given my grandfather, the yellow room with the smiley face sun pinned to his corkboard with a thumbtack. He'd kept it right where he could see it from his chair. I was in the study one night going through more records when the front door opened. Footsteps, heavy and fast. I killed the desk lamp and dropped behind the leather chair. Through the gap, I watched my father walk into the study, go straight to the desk, and start pulling drawers and dumping them. He swept books off shelves. He fed papers into the fireplace, and the flames lit up his face, hollow and mechanical. A record sleeve fell, and he stepped on it. Chet Baker. The crack echoed through the room, and I bit my arm to stay silent. He checked the floorboard, kicked the empty box against the wall, and left. I sat behind the chair, shaking. My father's shoe print was on my grandfather's favorite record. He was burning the evidence I needed for the hearing, and I had 4 days left. I drove to Gloria's house at 6 a.m. "My aunt threatened you." She opened the door in her bathrobe. She said if I talked, "You're not alone in this. I watched my dad burn documents in the study last night." Her eyes went wide. "The Bible. Did he find?" "No, it's still there. Go, now, before he goes back." I looked at her. "Will you testify at the hearing?" A long pause. "I'm scared." "I know, but if you don't, they win. The wing dies. Ada gets nothing." Another pause. "Find the letter first, then ask me again." I drove to the house and ripped the Bible off the second shelf and cracked it open. Hollow pages, sealed envelope, folder of documents. I sat in the leather chair and tore open the envelope. 3 pages, shaky handwriting. My father's name came first, with every forged signature and power of attorney abuse and transfer documented down to the dollar. I read each line and my grip tightened until the paper creased. Diane's name came next, with the jewelry and silverware and furniture she'd sold while Grandpa was in the ICU. My eyes burned. Garrett's name last, with the car and the forged title. By the third name, my face was soaked. The last paragraph. "Build it for Ada and the kids on the 4th floor. Build it because they deserve windows. I'm leaving everything to you because you're the only one who came on Sundays because you wanted to, not because you wanted something." The hearing was tomorrow. I walked into the hospital development office and put the will on the desk. My grandfather wanted every dollar to go to the pediatric wing. The family is contesting the will and the hearing is tomorrow. If I don't sign these papers today, a judge freezes the accounts in the morning and the wing never gets built. The director read the clause twice. He talked about this wing for 20 years. We thought it would never happen. She slid the paperwork across and my pen shook so badly she steadied my hand. I signed every line. On the way out, I stopped at the 4th floor and pressed my palm flat against Ada's window. She was asleep inside, drawings taped around her like wallpaper. Soon, I whispered. Then I called a family dinner. The hearing was in the morning. If this was going to happen, it had to happen tonight. I told them I was ready to discuss the estate, and every one of them came. Diane brought wine. Garrett helped set the table with his hand still wrapped from punching my car. My dad clapped me on the back. I knew you'd come around. I'd set the table. Diane's seat, a jewelry appraisal for the emerald ring she stole from the ICU. Garrett's seat, the title transfer for the car he forged and sold. Dad's seat, 5 years of bank statements, every theft circled in red. At the head of the table, Grandpa's empty chair, his letter. Diane looked down and the color left her face. Garrett picked up the title transfer and his jaw dropped. Dad unfolded the first statement and his hands went still. I stood up. You want to talk about the estate? Let's start with what you already took. My voice filled the room. Aunt Diane, Grandma's emerald ring, stolen from the jewelry box while Grandpa was in the ICU, sold for $1,800, worth $12,000. Diane's glass shook. I didn't. The appraisal is right there. I turned to Garrett. The car. You forged his signature on the title and sold it. Garrett shoved back from the table and his chair cracked against the wall. You don't know what you're talking about. I called the buyer, Garrett. He told me a kid showed up with the keys and paid cash. He lunged across the table. His hand caught my collar and he dragged me forward and my ribs hit the edge and plates went flying and wine splashed across the evidence. I grabbed his wrist and twisted and we crashed into the china cabinet and the glass doors exploded. He pinned me against the wall with his forearm on my chest and I drove my knee into his thigh and shoved him off and he went down over a chair. I grabbed a dining chair and held it between us. Sit down. The chair legs rattled because every muscle in my body was pulled tight. He sat on the floor. I turned to my dad. Every Tuesday, 5 years, you sat across from a man who couldn't see and you put papers in front of him and told him they were tax forms. My voice cracked. He couldn't afford a coat, Dad. I drove him to the store and he checked every price tag twice because he thought he was broke. And the whole time it was you. I slammed both hands on the table. He saved for 30 years to build dying children a hospital wing and you stole it from them. Dad stood up. He wasn't in his right mind. He was confused and he beat me at chess every Sunday, Dad. He knew every kid on the 4th floor by name. He hollowed out a Bible to hide evidence from you because he was sharper than every person in this room. You stole from your own father. He didn't need a hospital wing. He needed a winter coat. He was freezing in his own house because you took everything. He was old and he was dying and that money was going to be wasted on children, on kids with cancer, on a girl named Ada who draws pictures of windows because she's never seen the sky from her bed. That's who you stole from. Dad's face was red and twisted and his composure was completely gone. You want to know the best part? I pulled the receipt from my pocket and threw it on the table. The money is gone. I signed the donation papers this morning. Every last dollar goes to St. Jude's. Construction starts in April. You spent 2 months fighting over money that was never going to be yours. Diane went white. Garrett stared from the floor. Dad grabbed the receipt and his face drained of color reading it. You gave it away? To dying children, to kids who grabbed his hand when he walked through the door, to a girl named Ada who shows him drawings of a window she's never had. My voice broke. He loved those kids more than he loved any of you, and he was right to. Dad pointed at me. You are a child. What is she doing here? He'd seen Gloria. She walked in from the kitchen, coat on, folder in her shaking hands, and she looked my father in the eye. I watched you do it. Every Tuesday for 5 years, I watched you put papers in front of a man who couldn't see what he was signing. She set the folder on the table. Copies of everything. My mom spoke from the end of the table. I believed her. Every head turned. Mascara streaked down her face. I believed her because I already knew. I've known for years. She looked at my dad. You told me it was handled. You told me he was fine. Dad looked at Mom, and his whole face cracked open. You want to know why Grandpa left everything to me? My voice was raw and wrecked. Because I'm the only person in this family who showed up when there was nothing to take. They left one by one. Diane first. Garrett limping. Mom walked out without looking at Dad. He was last. He stood in the study doorway looking at the leather chair and I said, "Don't." And he closed his mouth and walked out. Gloria stood by the table with her hands finally still. "Thank you," I said. She shook her head. He asked me to do one thing. This was it. She looked at at the leather chair. He would have been proud of you tonight. I pressed my hand over my mouth because those were the words I'd needed to hear from someone in my family my entire life, and they came from his housekeeper. I drove to the hospital. 4th floor, lights dimmed. Ada's room at the end of the hall. She was asleep with her drawings taped around her bed. I touched the yellow one with my fingertip, the room with the big window and the smiley-faced sun. Then I drove to the house and sat in his leather chair and put the Chet Baker record on the turntable and dropped the needle. The trumpet filled the cold study, and I closed my eyes and listened the way he taught me, and for a few minutes the room wasn't empty.
Unbeatable prices, massive variety, and global shipping. Get yours now. Trust me, it's a game changer.